I was so glad he'd given his life to Jesus, because he did it with a sound mind. I was born in Stoke-on-Trent, and I had a friend who invited me to go to a concert, and that's where I met Alan. So it was very nice, and I started courting. We called it courting in those days. As soon as I met Alan, I knew I was going to marry him. I just knew he was the one. And then we got engaged, and then we married, but knowing that he was the man for me. He was a carpenter, and when we got married, I was earning just as much as him. And I said to him, Alan, I'm sure you could earn more money than me if you set up your own business. So that's what he did. And he set up a business, a do-it-yourself shop. And he was very successful, but he didn't like customers. He just didn't like customers. So he started a manufacturing business, and he excelled at that. I used to go to church and take the children with me, and I'd say to Alan, are you coming with us? And he'd say, no, it's all right, I just need to paint the fence. Oh, no, I just need to do whatever excuse. And then occasionally he'd come with me, just to shut me up, really. When Adam was, I think he'd be about 17, my son, my eldest son, because I've got 3 children, asked his dad if he'd like to come to a course at church. And he came, and he gave his life to Jesus. One day, he couldn't remember how to get home. He kept going round and round, and he said he couldn't remember how to get home, which is only down the road. And he remembered he got a friend who was an engineer in the town. So he knocked on his door, and he said, would you help me to get home? So he came home, and he was really upset. And that was the start of it. Alzheimer's is a strange illness, because when it started coming on, I'd be 50 and he'd be 52, because we didn't know what it was. At the time, I thought, he doesn't love me anymore. I thought he was having an affair. That's how it was. That's how I felt. I felt distant from him. And I found little notes about where he was trying to make notes, but he'd leave letters out. And then he forgot how to tell the time. And then it got us when he was getting dressed. He would put his underpants on his head, or he'd step into his vest. When it was diagnosed, in a way, it was good that I knew what was happening to him, and I could help him. He used to have a shower and be full of bubbles she put too much shower gel on, he'd be full of bubbles, and then he'd step out of the shower and I'd have to try and get him back in the shower, And one time it turned really nasty because I was trying to push him back into the shower. He got me round the throat and he tried to throttle me, really. And I swung the towel at him, and he just cowered in the corner. And he looked at me and he says, "Why are you hitting me with the towel, Barbara?" And I said, "Because you tried to strangle me, Alan." And he said, "I'd never do that to you. I love you too much to do that." He'd just lost it at the time. And that's what I was dealing with. I was working at the time because I had to go out to work to earn some money. But there came a time when I couldn't leave Alan, and then I had to finish work and look after him properly because I couldn't leave him. And and it got to a stage where poor Alan thought everybody was trying to poison him and kill him. He'd see his reflection and he says there again, he wants to kill me. And then he'd go into the sitting room and he'd see himself in the mirror and he'd say, my father's in there. If he saw a war film and they were throwing grenades, he'd run into the kitchen and he'd come in and I'd say, "What's the matter?" He says, "They're throwing them grenades, they're trying to kill me." It got to the stage where, I wasn't coping very well and I was frightened, and all my friends said, "Barbara, you can't keep this up." And so I phoned the social worker, and they kept saying to me, "You need to find him a home now. He needs a nursing home because he needs 24-hour care." So I just prayed to God. I said, "Lord, you've got to find him a Christian nursing home," and there isn't one. And then all of a sudden, the Methodist Homes bought one in Stafford. It was like God's provision at the time when I needed it most. And it was perfect for him. He was well fed, he was loved, And even though I had to go to Stafford all the time to see him, I didn't mind, because I knew he was in the right place and God had provided that place for him. They told me about a week before he died that he'd only got perhaps a day to live. I was there day and night for a week with him. Adam was, and Elizabeth and Alana, all the time. They kept coming, and being with him as often as they could at the end. And he was taking his last breaths, And Elizabeth said, "Mum, let's just hold Dad's hand now and ask the Holy Spirit to come and ask Jesus to take him now." Which we did. And Alan hadn't moved hardly for a week, and this great big tear just came from his eye and dropped on our hands as we were holding his hands. And then he passed. After he passed, I opened my Bible after he'd gone, and it felt open to that psalm where it says, "Where the deer pants for the water." And I just burst out crying. And that was Alan's favourite. He was always in here playing that. And I thought, God, you're in the minute detail of everything, isn't he? Right on his deathbed, I knew God was with us all. I just knew. And through that, I said to the Lord, whatever I've gone through, please will you use it for good. I started Hand because I wanted to help other people who were going through what I've been going through, to give the carers respite. Because if you've got a little bit of respite, you can carry on. And that's all I wanted to do, really, is helping where it's needed. You have to use your giftings, don't you? Well, my giftings, I'm cheeky. Always have been. I thought, right, I'm going to do nearly new sales to raise money for this Hand. Then we've had soirees at the golf club. I invite all my friends to the Chinese, and the Chinese manager does it at a good price, and so that's how I make the money, by being cheeky and asking my friends and family. It gave me a focus. It gave me something to do that was positive. See how God can turn everything round for good. All the tragedy and the awfulness. If you let him, if you give your life to him, he will help you and turn your life round to good.